Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Tuesday, July 15th, 2025, and today we're talking about when your plants are ready before the soil is, why some farmers should get royalties, and compost tea applications, because why not? So let's do it. All right, everyone, welcome to Tilth Tuesday. Every Tuesday this year will be brought to you by our friends at Tilth Soil. If you're looking for a great compost or propagation mix, check out tilthsoil.com. Link will be in the show notes. I hope everyone is doing well so far this summer, or winter if you're down there in the southern hemisphere. The heat has seemingly no quit this year, just won't give up, which has been a little challenging in the lettuce department, as it usually is, but typically we get at least some break in the heat. Germination has been fine, still, as I've described before, how we do that. But in the field, it's looking at me like the lettuce is just like, seriously, dude? We usually get at least one bizarrely cool night in July that I can be like, see, we're almost there. But we haven't got that this year. And I think of that like cold snap in July, similar to how I think of the warm spell we often get in January, like 2 or 3 warm days or nights. Like it's kind of like a taste of spring in January. And then we usually get like a taste of fall in July. But it looks so far, especially with looking at the forecast, like that ain't gonna happen. So just more heat on heat on heat. Sorry, lettuce. Anyway, today, that's not what I want to talk about. Today, I want to talk about should farmers be entitled to royalties in certain circumstances? Because it's Tuesday and that's when I do what I want. So, as you know, I wrote a book, The Living Soil Handbook. Many of you have read it, and I hope you enjoyed it. I've discussed how the finances break down in a previous episode on writing a farm book that I will link in the show notes if you're interested, but there are some interesting similarities between writing my book and farming that occurred to me recently. To back up, when you write a book, and especially a farm book, you will be offered an advance if you go through a publisher. My advance was $5,000, and it's a bit of a misnomer, the word advance. You get bits and pieces of it as you complete different parts of the manuscript, so it's really more of an advance of the book selling more than an advance of you actually doing the work, and the advance has to be recouped by book sales. In other words, I would not get paid more than $5,000, would not receive further royalties until my book sales covered that expense, at which point I would receive a royalty from every sale after that from the books that were sold. In the contract, my royalty is a small percentage, like 12 or 14% or something, and it's usually somewhere around $1.40 or something per book. So unless you are selling hundreds of thousands of books, and with farm books, I guarantee you are not, even with a, big profile where you talk about your book every single day. So anyway, unless you are selling bazillions of books, you are not making much money on your work. Effectively, you are paid a small amount up front for your labor, the manuscript, and then if it does well in the market, you are rewarded with additional revenue. This same sort of thing does and doesn't really exist in farming. Farmers are paid a small amount up front, like for the product, and then that's it. Someone gets to take that cheap product and turn it into something worth multiple times its original cost with, in many cases, significantly less work on their end, with no additional way for the farmer to make any more money on that year's worth of work they put in. So my question for you is, what if farmers, or at least some types of farmers, received a royalty or were offered a royalty? Here's an example. What if a fiber hemp farmer received $1 or whatever for every shirt that was sold that contained their fiber? So they are paid fair market value up front for their year of work or whatever product they supplied, the advance in this case, and then they are paid periodically from the sales for whatever the work is turned into, the royalty. So in the same way an author spends, let's say, a year working on a manuscript and then sells it, the farmer spends a year working on one crop and then sells that. But the crop, like the book, can provide a trickle of passive income over the course of the next year or so back to the farmer. Now, this would probably be far too complicated for food farmers like myself, but maybe there's a way. Maybe if you sell your product to, say, an organic salsa producer, you receive a small royalty based on their sales, or wine grapes to a winemaker, grain or fruit to a beer producer, etc. Even if, a few cents per jar. How would you enforce it or keep track of it? I have no idea. Is it even a good idea? Also no idea. This is not necessarily intended as a suggestion as much as, maybe like a thought experiment. So I'll be curious to hear what you all have to say about it. Could or should farmers receive a royalty option for what their products are turned into? I obviously don't think even a single manufacturer of a single good would be on board with this, but I could see specific producers of products who appreciate farmers and who uplift them or whatever, offering a little kickback to the people who literally make their products possible out of appreciation for those farmers. Now, I will not take it personally if you think this is a terrible idea, but is there a kernel of something in there? To me, if you want people to grow in an ecological way that takes care of the planet, these people need more incentive. And by incentive, I really just mean they need to make more money. It is impossible to take a year to grow a cog that somebody else is going to take like 2 months to turn into something else they make 10 times the amount of profit on. It's hard to sustain that. Farmers just need to get paid more. Maybe this is a potential mechanism for achieving that. Or maybe I just wanted to blow up our comment section. We shall see. So let me know your thoughts. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, what do you do when your transplants outrun your gardens? BRB. Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. If you're listening to this, you probably found 5 rare minutes to breathe. But what got pushed back further down the to-do list to make that happen? If it's your CSA newsletter, you're not alone. Farmhand's new newsletter builder was made for busy farmers. It automates weekly emails, drives add-on sales, and makes it easy to keep your customers in the loop without spending hours behind a screen. It launches this summer, but our listeners can request early access now. Visit farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will and do try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member Jenny Beasley, who writes, quote, "Thank you so much for generously sharing your knowledge and for the entertaining way you do it. I'm a newbie market farmer at 52 working on our 11-acre family farm in southern Indiana. The land has been traditionally farmed with corn and soybeans for most of the past century. My parents bought it in 1978 and have always leased it out, but now I'm stepping in with a new vision. Learning what seeds to start when has definitely been one of my biggest stressors. I started cucumbers before I really knew when my beds would be ready. After waiting for dry enough soil to do an initial till with our BCS tractor, we tarped the field on May 7th. We're now working in sections, pulling the tarp back, broad forking the clay-heavy soil, adding compost and harrowing it in to prepare for seeding or transplanting. We've just now reached a point where the soil is dry enough to work, but my cucumbers are way ahead of schedule. They've wrapped themselves around the rolling metal shelf their tray sits on and have started flowering. Should I pinch off the flowers? And when it's time to transplant, should I trim the vines to detach them from the shelf, or is there a better method?" End quote. All right, so great questions here. And don't worry, listeners, I did answer this question when it came up. But I think this idea of having crops, especially fruiting ones, ready to roll before the soil itself is ready to roll, it's an interesting one, and it is something that a lot of people run into, especially in those early years. Learning how to time crops is something that just takes a while, takes time, and takes notes to really get the hang of. Because when I start my crops here in Kentucky, may not be the same for someone in another area like Indiana or Michigan or wherever. Sunlight, warmth, rain, altitude, there are lots of different factors here. But in the meantime, while you were learning the when and how and taking notes, what happens when you have a crop like this that overgrows its welcome in the greenhouse? Well, in this case, what I would and did recommend is if the soil is not ready yet, pot the plants up into bigger containers. Yes, indeed, also pop off the flowers. With intensive cucumbers, you generally pop off the flowers anyway in the first 12 to 18 inches when you plant, so it makes sense. The thing I also could have added is that if the plant is wrapping around too much in the shelves, you can cut the plant back a little bit. Just be careful to leave a couple suckers. Similar to tomatoes, these are the new branches that form between the leaves and the stem of a plant and will produce a whole new main stem. It's not ideal to do it that way, but works in a pinch. You don't, however, want to top the plant, meaning to remove its top with no suckers below, or you will just have a doomed cucumber plant. It won't have any stems to grow from. If the roots are out roaming around, that could really be hard to deal with, as cucumber roots in general, all the cucurbits, do not really take kindly to being messed with. So you could try to pot them up, but in that case, especially if they start to just really, really wilt, it may be worth just starting over on the cucumbers. Now, Timing can be tough at first with these sorts of things. Like cucumbers grow significantly faster than tomatoes, for instance. So even if I plan to plant my cucumbers and tomatoes at the same time, I'm starting my tomatoes and especially my peppers 6 or more weeks earlier for the spring. So like an example of this is if I wanted to have my tomatoes for the tunnel in by the first week of April, I usually start those around the end of January, beginning of February, whereas the cucumbers, I would start at the beginning of March for that same planting time because they just grow so much faster and you want to get them out of those pots earlier. Then, of course, you will need to know that the beds will be ready to plant them by the time those crops are ready. Potting up definitely buys you some time, but it has limitations because they are probably growing away in a nice warm area, the greenhouse, with new soil, so they will take over that space pretty quickly. So again, take notes and revisit those when you're doing your crop plan this winter. Anyway, best of luck on the new property. That sounds fun, and I hope I was at least a little bit helpful. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, applying compost tea and water questions. Be right back.
Hello, Farmer Jesse, Peter, still in 7B, Maryland. Original pandemic plot. I was successfully grown lettuce for the first time. Lots of peppers, tomatoes, and other things, and because I can't get rid of suckers, I managed to stick them anywhere I can, so there are tomatoes up there. I planted corn and peppers and tomatoes along that fence.
All right, so this week I'm going to start to try to catch up on questions because I have barely got to June questions yet, and it's mid-July. So yeah, let's try to get caught up a tick. So Patreon member Dan Berta asked, quote, "Hi, Jesse. I've been enjoying your YouTube content for a couple of years and try to listen to your podcast every day. I really appreciate all that you do." Thanks, Dan. I have a couple questions about compost tea/brew applications. One, when applying compost tea, should you intentionally get some tea on the leaves of the plants or only focus on the soil around the plants? Two, I'm using city chlorinated water to irrigate and wonder if the compost tea efforts are actually worth doing if I need to up the frequency or volume of applications to combat the chlorine impacts on the soil microbes. I'm working to install a rain collection system to hopefully offset most of the city water usage, but not there yet. Thank you, end quote. All right, thank you, Dan. This is awesome. Good questions here. So the question number one about where to spray the compost tea, the general consensus is both the leaves and the soil around the plant if possible, assuming you are following all the other best practices for compost teas. Basically, do both if you can. Some plants will not readily utilize the tea depending on a number of factors, including the waxes they create on their leaves and their pore spacing, etc. Though plants grown inside of a high tunnel, for instance, tend to have fewer of those sorts of protections. Like go spray a broccoli plant and you will be hard pressed to find anything else that can shrug something off that quickly. Anyway, spray a little under the plants and where the stomata are, the tiny pores, holes that take in carbon dioxide and other nutrients. Plus spray a little bit around the plants where some nutrients, primarily micronutrients, can be taken up through the cuticles on the leaves. This should be done generally when it's cloudy outside or later in the evening or early morning. It's not clear to me how damaging the daylight is to the microbes in the tea, but better safe than sorry. Plants often take up a lot of CO2 and nutrients in the morning, so it makes sense that the morning would be the ideal time, but as I always say, sense is not science. So cloudy is generally the recommendation, so I say go with that. Then when it comes to the ground where the roots are, called a root drench, it is ideal to do so right before rain or when the ground is already saturated, so the microbes and nutrients and enzymes that aid quorum sensing, etc., all the things in the tea can more freely move around. Heavy rainfalls may harm the efficacy of the spray by washing it away, so I might wait until after a rainstorm if that is what the weather is calling for. I should add that the efficacy of the tea will depend almost more on the preparation than where and how you spray it, so make sure to really study that element of the process. And I know I've said this a lot of times, but for me, I don't spray many compost teas. My preference is to just soak the root balls or soak the trays before they go out to transplant. In that way, they can just soak up all that microbial tea or that compost extract or whatever I'm using. and then it just goes straight to where it plans to be used, which is right at the root zone. So I soak the tray and then I immediately take it out and plant it. As for your question about water and chlorine, this is something that deserves its own segment because it's an interesting question, how much city water affects microbial life. Generally though, yeah, you do not want to feed your soil antimicrobials if you can help it. So in terms of irrigation, there are some high volume filters you can get, like the Hydrologic Big Boy water filter, which can help filter some of the chlorine out. To be clear, I've not tried any other filters, but that's the one we have used to good results. I like it. The filter must be changed at least once per season. By the end of the season, you will start to smell the chlorine coming back into play. Otherwise, yeah, there is not a ton you can do depending on how much you irrigate. So the compost teas and extracts generally will be helpful, but I can't say for sure. It depends on a bit on the parts per million of chlorine, of chloramine, etc. in the water, how you're delivering it. Is it being sprayed above ground or are you doing drip irrigation, that sort of stuff. But that sounds like a good topic for another day. So we'll cover that another day, and especially because not everyone has access to great, clean, non-chlorinated water. All right. Great question, and I look forward to any thoughts you all have on today's episode. There's always more that could be said on foliar sprays and compost tea, so I will allow you all to flesh some of that out in the comment section. Otherwise, I think that's a wrap for this Tuesday. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and or subscribe and or follow wherever you are getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors, and if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeden for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and the team at No Till Growers. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. I know you've had. Pick up a hat, we got new ones, or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of July, you will get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Nora, Sebastian Coopers, I'm assuming Coopers, and Julie Rainey. Awesome. All right, so we're back with our friend who wakes up every day with a new career in his brain. And most of the time, the new career is relatively benign. The most he ever gets it from it is like once he woke up and realized that he was a pastry chef and had to cook a birthday cake for a duchess, and he was stressed about it all day. But he didn't really know which duchess or where or any of those things. Usually the details are scant. But this particular day, he wakes up and a name pops immediately into his head. And it's a familiar name because it's the name of a famous person. But he also just like suddenly knows an extraordinary number of details about this person, where they live, what they, where they eat, what they eat, the times of day they leave the house, all of the current projects they work on. And at first he thinks he's just woken up and as like somebody's personal assistant. Then he realizes that's not it at all. He's woken up as an assassin. What does he do? Well, that is for tomorrow on This Is Not At All a Ripoff of Quantum Leap. Love you, Scott Bakula. Anyway, thanks for watching and or listening. We will see you tomorrow.